Welcome in to the first ever inaugural Eau Claire League Fantasy Football Podcast. This is your host and longtime commissioner, Jack Filipiak, two-time Eau Claire League champion, excited to bring you some content on the Eau Claire Fantasy League as well as some updates in the NFL. I am joined today in the studio by former league member and owner of Project Top 13, Thomas Wilkin. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the first podcast ever.
We're very excited to have you, Tom. I have to ask, what's the story behind the team name? Project Top 13. Very unique.
It is unique. After the draft, I was analyzing rosters, and I knew I just didn't have a very good team compared to everybody else. And I thought it was me, Nick Pierce. This is at the time, by the way. Nick Pierce.
Sure, that's fair.
And then you. I thought we had the three worst teams. So I just thought it'd be like, it's kind of me just being like, shit, I had a really bad draft, and me just trying to have fun with the team name, because I really think that should be the goal. I think ESPN had me ranked 14th too on their little ranking system, so I was like, all right, I guess the goal is top 13.
I like it. I like that. I have to disagree with your assessment of my team, but that's okay. Let's move on, Tom. I'm very interested about the name. Our league is filled with, it's a 10-year league. We have a lot of great owners. In your opinion, tell me some of the top owners in our league, just overall in terms of their basic strategy, their drafting, their in-league management, and how they participate with the league. Who are some of the top owners in the Eau Claire League?
Yeah, I think for me personally, it has to do with interaction and then just loyalty, and I guess not always being reliable on draft day. Like those three things are key to me. So I mean, I gotta say, and this is gonna be a boring answer because I think there's different reasons for different.
That's okay.
I mean, I gotta say you and your brother, just for hosting, and like you running the league, importing the rosters, providing content. So easy answer there.
A little brown nosing, I always enjoy it.
Yeah, me brown nosing you, it takes a lot.
It does, as we all know.
I gotta throw Alex Main in there, because he's always reliable of being there. Always fun to talk trades with, especially with me. And I feel like he's always the one with like the most difficult trip.
I would agree with that. It seems like Maine is always commuting in for the draft.
And even this year, I remember I texted him and was like, are you coming? Like, what's your plan? Because we were trying to like audible like the last minute too.
Yep.
And his plan was he was gonna like drive in, leave when the draft was over, and then basically like go to his parents' house in like northern Wisconsin or something like that. And it was gonna be a long night, and he was just gonna do it. And like that was pretty awesome to me.
I love it. That's a fun fact I didn't know about Maino.
Yeah, so that's I mean, it ended with me just giving him a hotel stay in the cities. But like after hearing he was gonna do that, I was just like, oh man, that just sounds like a hell of a night, and like that's dedication right there.
Absolutely.
And then the last one I wrote down is I always just really am entertained with Gruesome Twosome.
The Gruesome Twosome. Hot take.
The combo team. At first, I didn't like them being a combo just because we always needed like an extra team to fill, and that just seemed like breaking them up was like the easy solution. But now I'm glad they're a team because they're just entertaining when they get really excited about like a pick that they got that they like both really like, and they celebrate. They're fun to talk trades with. So yeah, gotta go with those are my answers.
That is three great teams. Tom, I have to say, my initial reaction, those three teams you mentioned, three former league champion teams, myself, a two-time champion, Gruesome Twosome, league champs, and Alex Main, the inaugural league champion. Is there anything to do with the league championships?
Is it about being the league
About being a great team? Or is it more just about the things you mentioned? Was it just coincidence that we're all league champions?
Yeah, it is coincidence. I didn't really think about it from a performance, because I could really care less about the performance. And again, this is just my subjective answer.
Absolutely.
I like I said, those three things at the beginning, that's basically what I value in best quote-unquote owners.
That sounds great, Tom. Let's pivot into the next question here. Tom, let's move on to the next question here. I'm curious, this year during the draft, obviously our league has been together for 10 years, a lot of draft days. Do you have any specific memory from this year's draft, maybe a highlight from the draft of this year?
Yeah, this year was a little bit different, just because we did it on a weeknight, first of all, and it was not at your cabin. And with all the riots going on, we didn't know if we were going to have a draft that night or if we were going to reschedule. So, I can't really think of anything that like really funny or memorable happened just outside of it being very chaotic night, and we had to like switch locations, and everyone had to be flexible, and we made it work with not a lot of time to really think about how we were going to handle it. So
absolutely, that is what will stick out to me this year as well. The chaos of the draft. What you don't know, let's peel behind the curtain of your commissioner. 4 hours before the draft, texts and calls were flooding in as concerns of the Minneapolis riots nearly took the draft away. We had a few league members, including Mike Offner and Nick Filipiak, have to Skype in as they were scared of the big city riots. You hate to see it, but things did turn out okay. Tom, with the years of drafting, let's move on to maybe a more fun question. I'm going to ask you for an example of some of your favorite all-time draft day memories. I think mine would be year one, inaugural league draft. We're all in college, down at the Fifth Ave house with the Hudson House, as we called it. Mike Weiss, myself, Brady Darian, Nick Pierce, drafting in the living room with the pieces of paper on the wall. The beer league that Mano won and never got anything for. One of my favorite memories was that draft day. Do you have any draft day memories that stick out to you as some favorites?
Yeah, so this is like the 10th year we've done the league, I think, and it's just kind of funny to think back. I was always like a snake draft guy, and that was the first auction draft I did, and I never went back. Was able to implement that in the league that I have with like my high school friends. So yeah, snake isn't for me. I love the auction format. So
I agree with that for sure.
I'm glad we went that route when we started. And yeah, drafting in person and not like a ESPN draft room is just so much. It makes for just a better day, like a more fun day. A lot more unexpected things happen when not everyone's looking at the same pre-draft values and all that. So
absolutely.
So yeah, I liked all that. As far as my favorite draft memory, I mean, the one that really sticks out to me is when Porwall tried to get Kevin White for like $6 when he was ruled out for the season, like, I don't know, a couple days prior, and there was some controversy there about the price he should get him at, but I just remember just laughing because it was just a funny situation. I mean, whenever you draft someone who's out for the season and you don't know, and you know that they don't know, or you know but you know they don't know, and then you watch their face change as they figure it out, it's always just priceless. So
especially when it happens to an owner like Matt Porwall, I would agree with you there. I do think the controversy ended. Maybe a couple of Matt Porwall tears were shed, and I think he ended up getting the player for $1. We did make him keep him, but controversy was there indeed. Tom, let's switch gears here. I have a couple more questions I want to ask you around a separate topic. Let's start to look at this year's Fantasy Football League. For you, give me maybe 1, 2, 3, whatever you feel comfortable giving. Give me a couple examples of your biggest surprises in a good way for players this year in fantasy through 2 weeks.
Okay, so the one name that really sticks out to me that I really like is James Robinson. I like those kind of stories, guy. Like, he was undrafted. He went to a D1 AA school, and he's absolutely just blowed up the stat sheet through. He played on Thursday night, first game of week 3, and he had an amazing night. He's had pretty good weeks 1 and 2. So I got to go with him just because nobody saw that coming. I don't think he was really talked about when the whole Fournette thing happened. I think he was maybe like an in-the-mix guy, but nobody really saw this. And I know he got some luck, too, with, Rystad getting COVID or whatever. But
yeah, Armstead.
Story of the season. I mean, it's a COVID year. He gets his opportunity, and I think it's going to be really hard for the Jags to really take that away now.
Absolutely. I'm going to stop you. I 100% agree with the James Robinson pick. Last night, he puts up nearly 100 receiving yards on top of 2 scores through the ground. An amazing performance from James Robinson. He could be special this season. Tom, anybody else you have in mind?
Yeah, just 2 other quick guys. This one's kind of boring, but Joe Burrow, I've been really impressed with what he's had to work with and what he's able to produce still. His line is awful, and he just still is making like these incredible plays, getting out of pressure. I think he's going to be really exciting, especially once the Bengals get a little bit better. And then the last guy I had here was Myles Gaskin, another guy that played last night. But I think the story with him is, it was all about the 1-2 punch of Howard and Beretta. They invested some money in them, the Dolphins. Gaskins just wasn't talked about at all, and I think moving forward, he's probably going to be the primary guy out of that backfield.
I like those picks. I want to touch on both of those very quickly. Joe Burrow as a fantasy football quarterback is going to be solid, but as an NFL quarterback, he looks absolutely elite. I think Joe Burrow wins an MVP in his career, and I think he turns the Bengals into a Super Bowl team at some point. I'm not saying soon, but at some point. Gaskin, also a pretty crazy story. They bring in and pay 2 running backs, and Gaskin gets over 20 touches last night in the game. Seems crazy to me. Fun fact for you, looking at the stat book for Jordan Howard the first 3 weeks, more carries than yards. What do you think about that, Tom?
Yeah, so I thought it was funny last week where he was having more carries than yards and then a touchdown. And then the same thing happened last night. So it's hilarious that he has 3 touchdowns and hasn't cracked 10 points in any week yet.
Absolutely.
I had him. I drafted him. I thought he was a good pick at $8, and I've dropped him even with 3 touchdowns. He's just not rosterable in my opinion.
I agree with you there. Surprise player for me this season is not a deep cut like you, but my surprise guy through 2 weeks is Stephon Diggs. I think Diggs looks special in Buffalo. Josh Allen looks special as well. Of course, they played the Jets week 1, the Dolphins week 2. They haven't really been tested, so I'm excited to see what Diggs does this season. I think he has a real shot to finish as a top 3 fantasy receiver. Do you think that's in the realm of possibilities?
Yeah, I do. He was one of those guys that I thought his value pre-draft was probably accurate. One of those guys where it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up having like a pretty nice season, but I just didn't really put my trust in Josh Allen as a passer just quite yet, but he has looked really good. And if that keeps up, then I think Diggs will definitely be in the top 10 at receivers, and yeah, maybe a shot at top 3.
Absolutely. I think Diggs is changing my mind. I think he is a top 12 talent at the receiver position in the NFL. Let's move on, Tom. We've had our fun. We had the surprises, the big players through 2 weeks that we're excited about. Let's flip the script. Who are some players through 2 weeks that have been disappointments for you through the first 2 weeks of the NFL season?
So I wrote down 3 names, and I'm sure I'm missing some obvious ones here, but this is just who I thought of with no really real research. And I did a quarterback, a running back, and a receiver.
Okay.
So my quarterback, I put Tom Brady because so many people preseason were like, nope, this is like, go get Brady. He's like top 5 QB this year. And I didn't really buy it, but at the same time, it was like, well, like, he does have like really good targets to throw to this year. And but I don't know, and it's only 2 weeks, but like that was just the name I thought of at quarterback that I think is maybe borderline droppable right now in some leagues, depending on what quarterbacks are available. Joe Mixon is the running back I wrote down. Really a lot of expectations for him, and I don't think this is really on him, more so just when I watch the Bengals, that line, they just can't do anything in the run game or the pass game. But when he does have those moments where he like breaks through, that's where you like really see his talent, in my opinion. But it's just not consistent enough where he can make a fantasy impact. So he's been disappointing. And then this one I thought was interesting. But T.Y. Hilton, it seemed like he's finally good to go at the beginning of the season and healthy. And, he's been talking himself up a lot in the offseason. Got Rivers in there. I thought maybe he would basically replicate what Keenan Allen was doing.
Sure.
They're kind of that same type of player, I feel like. But through 2 games, he really just hasn't done anything. And I really do think that'll change, but through 2 weeks.
Tom, those are 3 great answers. I want to touch on each of them. Tom Brady first. Obviously, I am a Tom Brady fan for life. I love him. He is aging. Do you think his lack of production through 2 weeks can be attributed at all to the health of his targets? Week 1, not a healthy Mike Evans. Week 2, not a healthy Chris Godwin. Do you think he turns the corner with the full arsenal?
I mean, that's the story, and I think a lot of times when players go to a new place, it just takes a little bit of time too to kind of like you're not in your normal groove. So I think that definitely has a little bit of a role too. But yeah, like you said, they haven't really been at full strength. Gronk's been a huge disappointment.
Absolutely.
So it's through 2 weeks, so a lot could change. But that's why I wrote Brady down, just because I feel like fantasy expectations were high and they just haven't been great.
Absolutely. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Tom. What are the % chances that Tom Brady finishes the season as a top 10 fantasy football quarterback?
Oh man, I'm gonna say like 10%.
Wow, 10%. A very low grade from Tom. Jared Saul, I hope you're listening today. Tom Brady could be on the drop list for week 3. Joe Mixon, that's a team on my team, a member of my team, a team member of McNeil's Marauders. We hate to see it, but I can't help but agree with you here. The Bengals O-line looks atrocious. I do think Joe Mixon is a top 3 talent in the NFL at the running back position. With Burrow there, I hope that he turns the corner. I'm going to ask you the same question, Tom. What's the chances that Joe Mixon turns it around and finishes this season as a top 10 fantasy running back?
A lot higher, because with running backs, all it takes is like 1 or 2 really good weeks, and you're right back, with a high ranking. So I think if the Bengals are able to figure out a way to just put it together, he could definitely come through with a lot of points. So I'm going to say with him, I still don't think it's a high chance unless we keep seeing just all these injuries that keep popping up. But I'm thinking more like 20 to 25%.
Okay, I like the optimism there. The concerns for Mixon for me so far is obviously the lack of targets in the receiving game. It seems like he's still not developed into that role. Maybe it'll come more into the season with Burrow integrating into the offense more. Let's go to your last player, Tom, T.Y. Hilton. I'm going to be honest, I haven't watched a lot of Colts football this year. But could this be another scenario where Phillip Rivers is new in the offense? It seems like he's checking down to his running backs all the time. Maybe he starts to air it out more as the offense becomes more familiar with him. Give me the % chance that T.Y. Hilton closes the year as a top 20 fantasy receiver.
So I'm big on T.Y. Hilton right now, and I'll tell you why. I agree that it probably is a little bit of that with Rivers, so I think things can only go up for him as the season goes on. T.Y. dropped a touchdown, I think it was like 40, 50 yards last week that he should have had. It was right on the money, just flat out dropped it. So, I mean, if he catches that, he's not on this list.
Absolutely.
And I think with like the Colts too, they run a lot, and Rivers does check down. That's his game. But I think T.Y. all it takes, he's one of those street guys where if he can put a game together where he gets 2 long touchdowns or something like that, he's right back in the hunt. So the odds of him being top 20 and not top 10, I think I'm going to say more like 45-50%. I'm pretty high on him.
High praise from Thomas Wilkin for T.Y. Hilton to turn it around, to change his stars in that Indianapolis Colts offense. I'm excited to see where it goes. Tom, let's move on to the next question. I forgot before we jump forward, I do want to say that Tom intentionally did not include any injury-related duds through 2 weeks. That's why you didn't see names like Courtland Sutton, Saquon Barkley. on his list of disappointments. But Tom, now, next question. I want to pivot back to the draft day. I'm curious. I know you said you are project top 13 because of the low draft day grade from ESPN. What, in your opinion, was your worst move on draft day?
So, hindsight's 20/20, but looking back and kind of how I went about preparing for the draft, I actually really liked how I ended for the most part outside of the running back position. And a lot of that had to do with I kind of prepared off previous values and years, and it was not a receiver-heavy year. People did not want to pay for receivers, and people were willing to pay a premium for running backs. So there were running backs that definitely thought I was going to get cheaper than they were going for. And I kind of hit a point where I'd missed out on these top-tier receivers, but I had too much money, and I wasn't willing to invest that money of what they were going for maybe like low-end RB1s, but I was overspending for RB2s. So really, long answer short is my worst pick is the combo of Le'Veon and Devin Singletary. They're two guys I wanted, just not at the price. And I think my whole thing with Le'Veon is everything went wrong last year, and he was RB17. I mean, if you can get that guy for $30, where as long as he plays, things can probably only go up. I like that at $30. With Singletary, I thought this noise with Zach Moss was just kind of overblown. There's a lot of rookies drafted in rounds 2, 3, 4, 5 in the NFL, and I just felt like they were talking about Zach Moss a lot more than they were talking about other rookies. And Devin Singletary was a rookie last year, and he got a lot of playing time, and he averaged over 5 yards a carry. So I was like, that offense is better. He's going to be better. I thought he was a home run pick, around $20. I think I ended up paying like $26 for him. But I think, looking back, that wasn't noise. Zach Moss is getting carries.
Zach Moss very involved in the Bills' offense.
Lucky for me, I have both, so I hope just one of them can kind of run away with the job here at some point. But in a 14-man league, not having a reliable running back is tough to dig out of, and that's where I'm at right now.
Absolutely. Le'Veon Bell, Devin Singletary, two polarizing players, if you will, if you ask the opinion of each fantasy owner. My opinion on Le'Veon Bell is pretty much spot on with you, Tom. The volume there with the Jets being terrible all of last year, what's really changed? I thought Le'Veon Bell was penciled in for a top 20 running back this season. High volume, low production, I guess is how I would put it. I didn't expect him to get back to 5 yards per carry by any means, but I did expect him to at least be a top 20 player. Let's see if he can return from injury. Maybe he can still make a shot and get in the end zone. Devin Singletary, he was not my guy this year. I bought into the Zach Moss hype. I do agree with you. If one of them can just hold on to the job, at least you'd have a flex to RB2 level player. For me, worst move on draft day, it has to be, hindsight again being 2020, has to be Ronald Jones. I was high on Ronald Jones. I loved Ronald Jones. I thought that Bucs offense is going to be moving this season. They drafted a running back, Keyshawn Vaughn, but they drafted him late. I didn't think there was any shot he was getting any real touches. Sure enough, before the season begins, Leonard Fournette makes the move. Leonard Fournette looked like an absolute monster in Week 2. I'm very curious to see Ronald Jones' involvement in Week 3, if he can still maintain a 10-touch to 15-touch workload. I think it might be in the wind for him. I guess we have to hope for a Leonard Fournette injury, which seems to happen more often than not. That being said, Tom, it's been a weird start to the year. It's a COVID year. It was a weird draft for us. What are your thoughts just in general around the 2020 fantasy football season?
It's always crazy the first few weeks when you're trying to figure out your roster for the rest of the year, fill in injuries. I feel like people get so desperate so early, me included. And so I kind of love it. I love the start of this fantasy season. I love the craziness, and we had just had a crazy waiver wire, which we'll talk about later. But, I don't like the fact that players are getting hurt, but the silver lining out of that is it just creates trade talks and crazy waiver transactions and things like that. And you can have maybe a top 5 roster one week, and you can have one guy go down, and now all of a sudden, you realize you have no options. So to simplify my answer, I love it how through 2 weeks we are where we are, because honestly I think it's anyone's game outside of Nick Pierce maybe.
I like that answer. Chaos does seem to be an absolute constant for 2020. Tom, you brought it up with the injuries. I want to pivot here to NFL. Let's not talk about fantasy football for a second. Let's talk NFL football. In your opinion, give me a couple, at least one, the biggest injury in the season so far, just related to NFL, just as a team, the biggest injury, not necessarily fantasy football.
Okay. So I'm going to give a unique answer, and it's going to be just the 49ers as a team.
Okay.
Because, I mean, they just won the NFC. Everyone basically thought they were going to be right up there again. And that division's really good overall. And I don't think they're going to win the division. And I think a lot of that has to do with the injuries they've had on defense. I think the running back injuries that they've had isn't as big or isn't as impactful as it's going to be for, like, Bosa or Solomon. So since we're talking not fantasy related, I'll take advantage and say the 49ers, specifically the defense.
49ers absolutely decimated by injury. You have Garoppolo, Mostert, Tevin Coleman, Solomon Thomas, Bosa.
Sherman, I think.
Sherman also out for part of the season. It's very interesting to see what the Niners are going to do this week. I think they're on the road in New York for the second week in a row against the Giants, starting Nick Mullins at quarterback. I would agree with you there. The Niners are definitely the most injury-plagued team. Let's switch gears now. Instead of talking NFL, let's talk fantasy football again. Who are the biggest injuries so far through 2 weeks that are going to affect fantasy football teams?
Yeah, this one's really easy to me. It's Saquon.
Hard to argue with that.
I don't, and especially because he's not coming back. So I know the two popular answers here are probably Saquon and McCaffrey. I feel like with McCaffrey, you get Mike Davis, you play him 4 or 5 weeks, you get McCaffrey back. Hopefully you're still in that playoff hunt. If you make the playoffs, you're using McCaffrey in the playoffs. Hopefully all good is there. But the Saquon thing, not only do you lose Saquon, you don't really have that obvious guy to replace him with. But before the Freeman signing, everyone was saying go get Dion Lewis. I thought that was an opportunity to get Wayne Gallman, actually, because I thought Gallman was going to get more carries than people probably thought. But now that you throw Devontae Freeman in the mix, it's just like too jumbled for me, especially when you're trying to replace an RB1. It's messy. So I think that one probably makes more of an impact than Christian McCaffrey, but those are the two that come to mind. Just a personal take on that. The injury to Sutton I was upset with. I thought he was going to have an opportunity to really break out this year. So I was really bummed to see him be listed out for the year. So yeah, those are the three names that really came to mind.
Absolutely. Those are three that probably, like you said, the most common names. I 100% agree with the Saquon Barkley injury. The draft capital invested in him is high as one of the most expensive players. And honestly, as an NFL fan, tough to see. Saquon Barkley, a transcendent talent, very fun to watch, extremely explosive. In my opinion, the number one talent at the running back position. I don't even think it's close. I do love Saquon Barkley. I hope he can get back to 100% health and deliver some explosive runs again next season. Some players I wanted to touch on. You touched on the big three. I think injuries to Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, James Crowder, all very interesting. Obviously, Crowder not as impactful as the first two I said. Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams, I think both owned by Matt Porwall. You hate to see injuries to the receivers. Receiver injuries seem to nag all season. They really do. I hope that these two guys can return at 100% health. We'll see where it goes, and we'll see what it means for the Dalai Lama or whatever the fuck Porwall calls his team. But, Tom, let's move on here. I don't want to talk about injuries the whole time. It's just going to make me depressed. Enough for the injuries, Tom. You hate to see it, and you got to expect more this season, unfortunately. But, Tom, let's change gears. Let's go back to the Eau Claire Fantasy Football League. Let's be honest. We have some complacent owners. We just do. Yourself and I think we tend to be some of the more active owners in the league. Tom, can you give us a couple tips for some of the shitty owners in our league, some of the people that just They're just shit owners, let's be honest. Give us some tips. How can they be better members?
Quiet members typically, in my opinion, are the worst ones. So just be active on the message board, the smack talk, the text chain. Also, what I wrote down is the broier and douchier you are, the better. I mean, it's fantasy football. It's supposed to be fun. Be a bro, be a douche. Makes it more fun.
I like that. I think, Tom, you tend to be a little of both sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know how much of a bro I really am, but yeah, I like to be a douche.
I've experienced that myself on the message boards, as I'm sure you're all familiar with. Thomas loves to hate two-time league champion Jack Filipiak. I'm going to touch in here. I understand we all have lives. I understand a lot of us have welcomed life into this world. I understand not everybody can take a 5-hour drive to Iowa and make a podcast with Thomas Wilkin. That being said, everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has 60 seconds. Put something on the message boards. Throw a text to the 16-person group text at 7 o'clock in the morning. Do something. Make a trade. Be involved in the league. I think it helps everybody. I think it makes our league more fun. Open to suggestions here on the pod. You can call me with questions at 715-222-6897. I'd love to hear your suggestions for how league members can be more active so we can make this league a little bit better. I don't want to call anybody out individually on their lack of participation, but Weiss has been a repeat offender in years past, so I will call him out. Maybe he's still doing Weiss Wellness. I don't know what he's doing in Denver, folks. I don't know. But I would love to hear him on the board since I don't get to see his face anymore. Weiss, this is a call out to you. Please be better. Enough of that, Tom. Enough of calling people out. I want to talk about the Eau Claire Fantasy League. There is a lot of 0-2 teams, is there not?
Yeah, I think there's 4 or 5.
4 or 5 0-2 teams. Tom, in your opinion, which of these 0-2 teams has the best shot to turn their season around, to really change their stars and get themselves a playoff berth?
So, an 0-2 team that I really like is Eric Schmeichel's team. He's got Ezekiel Elliott and Austin Eckler. I don't really understand the criticism about Eckler. I mean, he's getting volume, he's getting yards, just really hasn't gotten touchdowns yet. So I don't think Eckler is like this bust that some analysts, have been stating. He also has CeeDee Lamb, who I think is only going to have more value as the year goes on.
CeeDee Lamb, I agree with you there.
Cooper and Gallup do have a little bit of injury history, so I'm just wondering if one of them goes down for a few weeks, that will really be an opportunity for him. He also has Chris Godwin, who had the injured start. A.J. Brown with the injured start. So Schmeichel's had some bad luck, I think, and I would be shocked if this roster didn't make the playoffs.
I agree with you there, Tom. I think Mr. Big Meat, Eric Schmeichel, has a real good team. I think Zeke is going to continue to, potentially with the injuries to McCaffrey and Barkley, has a real shot to finish as RB1. You're dead on with the receivers being injured. Those guys are going to come back. They're young players. They're going to be good. Those are both, in my opinion, top 24 players. I like the pick. I also agree with you. I think Team Mr. Big Meat turns it around, gets himself a playoff berth. Tom, any other 0-2 teams that you think have a shot, or do you want to pivot and tell me which 0-2 team is the worst and has absolutely no shot to make it?
I thought Chad was probably second on my list. I thought Schmeichel was a clear first, though. Quick about Chad. He has McKinnon, who I think has a real opportunity here to maybe be relevant again. He also has T.Y., which you heard my opinion about earlier. I think he'll
very high on T.Y.
He also has DeAndre Swift, who very well, could get handed the keys just full-time later this year, and if that happens, I think Chad is also in a pretty favorable position here.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Bringing in Peterson did not help the DeAndre Swift stock. You hate to see a rookie drop a game-winning touchdown, but I do agree. I think Swift a talented player. I think eventually he is handed the keys to the castle in Detroit. Two good picks there, Tom. So those are two of our 0-2 teams. I would agree with you. Both of them have a shot to turn the season around. Which 0-2 team has no shot?
To me, this one's pretty obvious. It's the gruesome twosome. Not really their fault with the Saquon injury. That was a big blow to them. And the fact that they don't have Devontae Freeman, they didn't have a chance to go after him in waivers because he was owned somehow by Nick Pierce as his RB 65, or however running backs Pierce has. But they have some players that aren't working out so far. Dalvin's been kind of a disappointment. AJ Green hasn't looked good at all. They're starting Larry Fitzgerald right now. Deebo Samuel, who's hurt. Peterson Cobb on their bench. There's just nothing appealing to me that where I think their team could head in the right direction. So I think they're the worst team.
Yeah, as the roster sits now, it's hard to disagree. Obviously, no one predicts a Saquon Barkley injury out for season. A ton of draft capital invested in him. Do you think the gruesome twosome's best shot is to explore trade options for Dalvin Cook? Dalvin Cook's still a great player, could be a great trade piece, could provide them some much-needed depth. For Christ's sake, they're starting Larry Fitzgerald. That's a fucking travesty, Tom. What do you think their best shot is to try and turn it around? Should they take a hard look at the roster to make a trade?
Yeah, I think regardless of what they want to do, Pierce is probably the guy that they need to work out a deal with. Because he has the depth, which is what they need. And yeah, they're probably going to have to give up Dalvin in return. But I think they could have a win-win scenario there.
Yeah, I agree. Dalvin seems to be the only piece left in a crumbling roster. When the bye weeks come, a team like this is going to get just absolutely decimated. Heart goes out to the gruesome twosome. Nobody likes to see a team fall because of injury. I hope that they can work out a trade and maybe screw over Pierce, who has a stable of running backs. So, best of luck to you there, Tom. Let's switch gears away from these worst teams, these bottom dwellers. I hate to see me and you down there as well. I wasn't going to touch on it, but I feel like I have to, or the message boards will be abrupt with comments. Let's go to our 2-0 teams. Which 2-0 team is going to fall from the graces and miss the playoffs this season?
So reviewing the 2-0 teams, I thought, in my opinion at least, it was pretty clear cut. I thought Matt Porwall has the best team out of the two. I think Nick Pierce has the best team, but strictly talking about 2-0 teams, I think it's probably Porwall.
And you're saying Porwall has the best team, correct?
Porwall has the best team out of the 2-0 teams.
Okay. I just wanted to change gears. I think I asked which team was the worst, but let's move to the best. The best of the 2-0 teams, you've got Matt Porwall. Explain.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
So we'll start with best and then go to worst. So with Porwall, he really went heavy with the receivers. You got Devontae Adams and Michael Thomas. Their injury stuff's been a little unfortunate. So you think when you spend that much money on those guys, you're probably pretty weak at running back. He's not great at running back, but he has Gurley, Gordon, and now he has Gaskin, who could very well end up being a flex guy for him. He also snagged Tariq Cohen off the waiver wire from me when I had to pull my hair out as I was dropping him, but it just didn't make much sense for me to have him on my roster anymore. Cohen, who's been an extremely big disappointment, could very well end up having, a flex-worthy year. So that could have been a nice snag from Porwall. He's also got this, I'm going to botch his name, Gesicki,
Mike
guy,
Gesicki.
who the last 2 weeks has looked pretty good. So I think Matt, he's going to have to rely on these receivers, and I think he's good enough at running back. He's got Gurley and Melvin Gordon. He's also got Slayton, who, after the injury news of what's his name? Shepard, yeah. Slayton could be a very nice receiver there. So I like Matt's team.
Yeah, and when you read it aloud, Matt does have a nice team. Pretty impressive for Matt to be 2-0 fighting the Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams injuries. I didn't realize Matt was 2-0. That's impressive. He's also, Gurley and Gordon seem to be surprises for me this season. You throw Darius Slayton in the flex. If everybody's healthy, that's a heck of a team. I do have my concerns about health for this team. The receiver's already banged up. Todd Gurley, with his injury history, at any moment his knees could literally buckle and he could be done. But as it stands right now, it's hard to disagree with you on the pick of Matt Porwal. Tom, I'm going to ask you something, and Matt, I hate to be pointed, Matt Porwal tends to be an owner that blows it. He tends to not be a playoff team. Do you think that factors into your decision?
No, not right now. But I laugh when you say that because I remember playing Matt in the playoffs like 2 or 3 years ago, and Matt had it won. And he had Derek Carr, who ran in a touchdown late in the game. Turns out he fumbled the ball right before he crossed the pylon. That play resulted in me winning the matchup and Matt losing. Just terrible luck.
That is, one would call it terrible luck, Tom, and I would call it bad management by Matt Porwal, starting Derek Carr in a playoff game. That's on him. That's not on Derek Carr. We expect Derek Carr to let us down, and he did what we expected. Tom, Matt Porwal, best 2-0 team. Who's the worst 2-0 team?
Yeah, this one was pretty obvious to me. It's Nick Filipiak. He's 2-0. This team's not bad, but when we're comparing the best of the best, I just don't trust the options he has. He has David Johnson. Don't really trust him to be a true RB1. Fournette, nice surprise last week, but I still just don't see Fournette really carrying this like big fantasy RB1 type role. He's got Adam Thielen, who I think that Vikings offense just is not going to be as great. He's going to struggle from it. Zach Ertz, there's drama in Philly with him not getting the contract. Goddard has been getting targeted a lot. He has Frank Gore in the flex right now. Looking at his bench, just not a lot of upside in my opinion there. He's got Phillip Lindsay, Duke Johnson, Rex Burkhead, Emmanuel Sanders, Valdez Scantling, and that Ayuk guy from the 49ers, I botched his name. Just nothing that really gets me excited as what you can replace with, Frank Gore, for example. So I don't know. I think he needs a lot of help if he wants to be, the best of the best.
I don't disagree there. The 2-0 start for Nick. He did get to play me last week, which is seemingly to be a free win right now until my team turns it around. So Nick, sorry to see it. You will miss the playoffs this year. 2-0 start. The kid does crumble. I guess I'm excited to see what happens week 3. Tom, let's change gears one more time. I got a couple more questions for you that I want to ask. Tom, something that struck a chord with me this week is my quarterback play. I got Daniel Jones. I started Tyrod Taylor week 1. My quarterback has averaged under 10 points the first 2 weeks. I look around at rosters and I see you carrying Kyler Murray and Josh Allen. And then I look at a team like Jake Walzak's team and I see Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton. I can't help but ask myself, what the fuck was I doing on draft day? Tom, what do you think of trading quarterbacks? What's a quarterback's value? What could I offer Jake Walzak for Cam Newton, for example?
Yeah, I think our league overall just doesn't really value quarterbacks that much. So carrying 2 quarterbacks where one of them should be starting, I think is tough. You got to go into it knowing that you're not probably going to get a lot in return, which is exactly what I'm doing right now with Josh Allen. I think Kyler is definitely the person that you favor over those 2 options, and I'm not. I think with Josh Allen and probably Cam Newton in that same category, I think like a flex or like your best bench player, and in my opinion, is probably what you should get. I think with Cam Newton, the Patriots the first 2 weeks have made it very obvious when you get within the 5, they're doing shotgun and he's running the ball. And there's a lot of value in that. If he literally is getting those opportunities every single game, we're talking about a quarterback who has a shot at running in like 13, 14, 15 touchdowns.
I absolutely agree with you there. Cam Newton looked like an absolute monster on the goal line right now. That's no surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. The big body of Cam Newton, he's known to do it. Jake Walzak, you heard it here first. Brashad Perriman for Cam Newton. I think we both make it to the playoffs with a trade like that. It's electrifying. Brashad Perriman's talent, elite. Maybe let's look at some stats from the end of the year last year with the Bucs. I think Brashad Perriman, a top 12 receiver here on out. I will give him to you for Cam Newton. I might just push it through for Sunday. Maybe text me what you think on that. But I like it, Tom. I agree.
I'll save Walzak the time of researching who he needs to target, which teams. It's Weiss, it's Jack, and it's Jarrett. Everyone else doesn't need a quarterback. Maybe Schmeichel. He has Stafford.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm starting, like I said, Daniel Jones. I think Jared Saul, the Wingdom Warriors, is starting Tom Brady. I think it's going to be hard for Jared to move on from Tom Brady, and hard to blame him. You're going to put me on the spot here, Tom. Oh, you said Matt Stafford. You said his quarterback is Matt Stafford. I agree. I think Stafford is probably a quarterback you can play, but looking to make a move. I don't know what the right play is to trade quarterbacks. I don't know what I'd be willing to give up, all jokes aside. I think a Ronald Jones, I think a Brashad Perriman are probably not enough. I think an Antonio Gibson or a James Conner probably too much. Open to fielding offers, but a hard trade to make. Tom, we talked about the best of the best in our league. We talked about the worst and the worst. Let's touch on the NFL. I'm going to start with the 2-0 teams. I'm going to start with the 2-0 NFL teams. It seems like there's a ton of them. Tom, who, in your opinion, is the best NFL team that's 2-0?
I'm going to be boring here. And I think the Chiefs are just... That offense is too good. I know the defense is a little concerning, but, the weapons they have and the fact that they have, a legit, running back now, for me, it's just got to be, you got to change my mind by beating them. Up until them, they're the best to me.
Hard to disagree. I don't think we need to dwell on this one. Concerning game last week against the Chargers, but they pulled it out. I was never really in a doubt that they were going to win. I was just surprised it was that close. Tom, what about, let's go the other way. Which 2-0 team is the worst 2-0 team in the NFL?
So the 2-0 teams that stuck out were the Bears and the Titans. I'm going to say the Bears are probably the worst, just because they don't really have that quarterback position figured out, and I just value the quarterback position so much that I don't really trust Trubisky. Somehow he beat out Nick Foles, and even if they switch, I still don't have enough faith in Nick Foles to really view them as a threat.
Hard to disagree here. I'm 100% on board with the Bears being the worst 2-0 team. Trubisky, he's fake. The guy's a phony. I don't buy it at all. I think we put Brad Udarian under center. I think we're going to get similar results down in Chicago. I think Chicago crumbles. I think they end the season with 5 to 6 wins. I don't buy it. For you sports bettors out there, give me the Falcons this week to cover in a slam dunk lock of the week for Jack. Tom, I think we talked about our 2-0 teams here being the worst. Let's go 0-2. Which 0-2 team in the NFL is going to turn around? Give me the best 0-2 team.
It's the Falcons. This one was pretty easy looking at it. That offense is just too good to not win, 8-9 games maybe. So, another team was the Eagles. I'm just not that big on Wentz, but I'm a little surprised that they are 0-2. Falcons had a heartbreaking game last week, though, and I think they're definitely the best team here that's left that's 0-2.
I agree with the Falcons. I think the offense is electric. The defense is concerning in Atlanta, but when you've got Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, Hayden Hurst, it was one of the best receiving corps in the NFL, if not the best, in my opinion. I think if that receiving corps goes to Green Bay, we got a Super Bowl. I really do. I think that is the best receiving corps in the NFL. Like I said, defense concerns me. Gurley's health a little bit concerning, but I do think that the Falcons win 9 games this year. I agree with you there. Eagles, I'm on board with. I think they're a talented team. I hate to see the Wentz regression. The O-line seems to be giving them some trouble as well. I don't think that they have a shot to make the playoffs this season. I think they're a 7 to 8 win team, but it is weird. They're a talented team. I don't know what to think there. What about the worst of the worst, Tom? We got 0-2 teams. Who's the worst team in the NFL?
I didn't even look this one up, but it's got to be the Jets, right?
It has to be the Jets. Again, another one. We don't need to talk about it. The Jets are fucking awful. We've seen it over and over again. It's hard to find fantasy value there. It's hard to find NFL value there. Who's the best player on their team? I don't know. I don't know. Tom, who's off the top of your head? We did no research. Who's the best player on the Jets right now?
Someone in free agency that they haven't signed yet.
That's the right answer. I think that's the right answer. It's an abomination. Let's tank it. Let's move on from Sam Darnold. Let's bring Trevor Lawrence in. Let's move on from the Bell contract. Let's figure something out. I think the Jets have a legitimate shot this year to go 0-16. We'll see what they do as an 11.5-point dogs to the Indianapolis Colts this week. Tom, let's talk about the crazy week in week 2. The waiver wire. We haven't had a waiver wire like this in a long time, it doesn't seem like. I think the biggest surprise to me, potentially not the cost of the pickups, but we have an owner. One of the more experienced fantasy football minds, in my opinion, in Brad Udarian, with $100 left in his fab, hasn't put a dollar bid in one on a player yet. I didn't even bother to look if he put bids in, but is it surprising to you that an experienced owner like Brad still has all of his waiver budget?
No, because Brad is smart and he's playing everybody right now, and he knows it and he's laughing about it. I mean, you look at the prices that some of these players are going for, Brad's probably going to get equivalent value week 10, 11, 12 when he actually needs those guys like on his playoff roster where he's in a good spot to make the playoffs right now. And everyone's going to be pulling their hair out because he's going to get, an instant starter for basically free. So Brad doesn't necessarily need to go all in. I think we're going to talk about the top 3 guys that got claimed, and I'll give you my opinion about how I feel on that. But no, I think to keep it short, I think Brad's actually being really smart by keeping all of his money and still having a pretty quality roster, and I think he's just picking his moment to pounce with his fab budget.
I don't disagree. It's easy to lay back in the weeds as a 2-0 team. I think Brad probably doing the right thing here, saving some waiver money. His team doesn't have any immediate needs that I see. I'm sure it would be nice to claim one of these players that were in the waivers this week, but hats off to Brad. Hats off to being patient. He's an owner that I don't think has found himself to a league championship yet. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride for Team Udarian. I hope to see him in the playoffs this year. He's a player I like to have there. His activity in the message boards, it is down. I'm not going to lie, Tom, it's down. I hope he brings it back this year. But you touched on it already. There was 3 players I want to talk about in the waivers on Tuesday that ran that were surprising. They were surprising to me. I knew they were going to go for a lot. I didn't know how much. I want to talk about Darrell Henderson, Dion Lewis, and Mike Davis. Tom, what are your thoughts on those 3 waiver claims this week?
So I'll put it this way. The Mike Davis, I think if you're a Christian McCaffrey owner, go ahead and clear your budget, and I'm not going to say that was a bad move. And that's basically what Weiss did, is I think he put down $77 to get him. I mean, to me, that's just insurance. You ride that out. You hope he's as good of a fill-in as they're saying he's going to be. And then you get McCaffrey back, you ride him on your bench, and you're good. For non-McCaffrey owners, this isn't relevant to our league, but I hate spending money on Mike Davis, and that happened in a couple of my other leagues, but I won't go down that road. The Dion Lewis, I mean, that, again, I think this whole Saquon scenario with Gruesome Twosome is just unfortunate. I kind of hate the fact that they spent so much money on a guy that's probably not going to be relevant, but I also understand it because Dion Lewis probably will be fantasy starter worthy for a couple weeks until Freeman is up to speed. He kind of runs away with that backfield. That's just my take on it. The Henderson pickup with Pierce, I hated it. I hated it for Pierce because his bench is already so good. His running back core is already so good, where he should have done what Brad did, just sit back and wait and just continue to just put out these really solid lineups each week, and then later down the road where something happens to your roster where you need a guy in waivers, that's where you pounce and you make your move. And I still think that the whole Rams backfield in general is just too jumbled. I don't really know if they're ever really going to have a guy this year, and if it is, I think my money's on Cam Akers. So I don't know. I didn't hate the price tag for Henderson. I just didn't like the price tag for Pierce.
3 good takes, Tom. I agree with you for the most part. I'm 100% aligned on Weiss picking up Mike Davis for the McCaffrey replacement. I did that myself in the Hudson League. I think you have to. I think it's an unfortunate situation. I think you have to do it. I hope that McCaffrey sits out the full 4 to 6 weeks. As a McCaffrey owner, I don't want to see him playing in 2 weeks. High ankle sprains, I don't need to see it linger. Come back when you're 100% healthy. The McCaffrey owner, you have to go get Mike Davis. Dion Lewis. I get it. You lose Barkley. I think what we have here, Tom, and I don't know if they'll ever admit to it, I think we have uninformed owners. I don't think that the Gruesome Twosome had any idea that Freeman was signed. He was signed on Tuesday. He was signed before waivers ran. I would have canceled that waiver claim or lowered my bid. I think you're right. I think Lewis has some value. I think he's a flex guy. I think he gets 10 touches this week. I think in the long term, unless Freeman is a complete flop, Lewis is not going to be a guy you want in your starting lineup. I would not have put the claim in for $71 on Dion Lewis. I think it's the worst pickup that we're going to have this year. I think it's the worst pickup I've seen probably in the past 5 years. That being said, they're in a tough spot.
Here's what I would do if I was Gruesome Twosome. I would trade Dalvin, and I would try to get James Robinson, Devontae Freeman, and maybe one more small throw-in piece from Pierce.
Tom, I hate to hear you give such good advice on the podcast. I think that's a league-winning move for potentially Pierce, but it's a move that the Gruesome Twosome has to make. We'll see if they do it. I agree with you. That would be a very interesting trade proposition. But yeah, I'm out. I'm out on the waiver acquisition. I think it's terrible. You're right on with the Henderson pick. Pierce, I don't mind adding more depth. I don't mind the pickup. I don't mind the price. I don't think it was right for his team. I don't see Henderson ever being a starter. I see him being a guy that potentially in 2 weeks Pierce is going to drop. I think you're right on with Akers and Brown. If everybody comes back healthy, I think Henderson at best is getting 5, maybe 10 carries. No shot to be a flex player if everybody's healthy. Of course, you never know. You never know. Things change. I don't mind the depth piece. Not right for Pierce's team, in my opinion, though. Tom, let's talk about a couple more topics as we wrap up the first episode of the podcast. There is a few more things I want to talk about. Thomas, in our league, I think you're kind of known as the trade guru. I would think you offer more trades than I would guess any other league member combined in a season. While I have you on the show today, I would be remiss if we didn't do a little bit of trade talk. I hope you're okay with that. We already offered up Pierce and the D-Boys some fantastic advice. I want to talk about trades. I want to talk about general trade strategy with you, but first I want to talk about a specific. It's a scenario that I've seen all over the league. I have 2 examples specifically, one with Mike Offner and one with Jared Saul. My trade question for you is, if you own players, let's take Offner's team for example, if you own Kareem Hunt and Odell Beckham, 2 players in the same team, a running back and a receiver. If you own Chris Carson and Tyler Lockett, again, a running back and a receiver on the same team, what's the trade strategy there? I don't know if I love owning a running back and a receiver from the same team. You look at a team like Jared Saul, finds himself in the same spot with the Chiefs. He has Clyde Edwards-Helaire along with Hill and Kelsey. What do you think about the all-in strategy on one team? And if you have to make a trade, what's a trade tip for him?
Yeah, with Jared, too, he's got the Chiefs defense and Sammy Watkins.
It's a lot of Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Offner's situation is unique because he has 4 starters from 2 teams. I'll put it this way. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but I definitely wouldn't want it if I could avoid it. And the reason I say that is not so much during the year, but if come playoff week, the Browns put up 3 points one week as a team, you're just out of points from 2 of your roster spots, and you're probably going to lose because of it. So I think it gets overreacted a lot, and I don't think it's that big of a deal throughout the season, especially in our format where, you're just trying to get into the playoffs. You can get points. I don't really care so much about the week to week, where you might be really high one week and low the next, or the risk that carries of having 2 guys from one team. But come playoffs, that's where I want to avoid it if I can. But I mean, to be fair, the 4 names that he has that fit that scenario are all really good players. So
They are all really good. I agree with you there. However, there's breaking news, Tom. Odell Beckham, he likes to be shit on. What does that do to his trade value?
I think this is when you really take advantage of that, and you downplay it. You text, offer, and you say, hey, you probably don't want someone on your team that likes to get shit on. So why don't I take that shit from you?
That's a great line, Tom. That's a great line. I don't disagree. Trade offers going to be pouring in for Odell Beckham. I've got an offer for you right now live on the podcast. Breshad Perriman for Odell Beckham. Perriman on the block. He's been offered already for Cam. I expect an offer to come back this week. First to get to me gets Breshad. Good luck. What about, I want to touch on Jared. It's a unique draft. It's a unique draft when you have 5 Chiefs on your team. He also has home run hitter Hollywood Brown. If you were in Jared's spot, Tom, would you try and move a Chief? And if you were to move a Chief, which one would you move?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want Jared's situation, but I also don't think... I think the Chiefs are so unique of just how frickin' loaded they are on offense, where you probably can get away with this and still be successful in fantasy. But no, if I was Jared, I would try to trade one. Probably Tyreek Hill. If I were him, he would be the guy that I would try to trade. I mean, he's got Marvin Jones Jr. on the bench, who definitely not a great starter, but I mean, if you can make a trade happen where you're maybe upgrading something else on your roster and you can throw Marvin Jones in as your wide receiver too, as like a last resort, I don't think that's the end of the world. And yeah, I mean, I have been trying to trade with Jared because he has Tom Brady. Josh Allen is better. He and I both know that. We've been trying to figure out a trade that makes sense, and he's mentioned that he's trying to get rid of Chiefs, which makes that trade so much harder because his Chiefs are too good to trade Josh Allen for. So I would basically need to throw in like a Mike Evans or a Julian Edelman, to even start a conversation. And I think it just gets messy having that many players from one team.
I agree with you, and I like that you touched on trading elite players like Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Very hard to do. Very hard to find similar value. I think Jared's example, I agree. If I move a Chief, I move Tyreek Hill. And Jared losing Marlon Mack week 1, I trade him for an RB2. I think I try and move Tyreek Hill, for example, for somebody like James Conner. Sure, maybe the James Conner owner has to throw in a second piece. Maybe it's James Conner and, Breshad Perriman, for example. It's something. But if I'm Jared, I agree. I think Jones in a wide receiver 2 spot, not the end of the world. I think Golladay coming back makes Marvin Jones better. Hot take for you there. I'm moving on from Tyreek Hill. I want an RB2. I want a top 15 running back for him and maybe a second piece, depending on who the player is. If I'm Jared, I'd like to move Tyreek after this week. I think... Honestly, if I'm Jared, I'd like to move Tyreek before this week. I think playing Baltimore is going to be a tough out for Tyreek Hill. I think his trade value goes down after this week. Interesting things to come for Jared Saul and the Chiefs team. Tom, what about general trade tips? Do you have any general trade tips for people? Like I said, very hard to trade. Everybody, including Chad Copes, who is our worst defender, values their players like they are Greek gods. I think if you tried to trade Chad Copes for Alvin Kamara, he would demand a king's ransom plus his entry fee for the league. What are some general trade tips?
Yeah, I love trading. I think it makes just things more exciting. An excuse to just talk to your friends more. I think the keys to trading is you gotta put in the effort. You gotta be willing to take criticism. Nobody starts off with a good trade offer. You always want to get enough to get their interest to start a conversation. And I think a lot of times too, value is subjective. So I might think something's a great offer, and someone else might on the other side think it's terrible, or vice versa. So I think you just got to take advantage of the fact that trades are subjective and just fire away. Try to find a trade that makes sense, for all the other teams that you're trying to get rid of that piece. Like me, Josh Allen, I was talking to you. I was talking to Weiss. I was talking to Jared. I think I offered Schmeichel a couple of trades. So you also got to know that the trade you're offering makes sense for them too. It's got to be a win-win, you know. So don't offer. I'm not offering Offner, who has Pat Mahomes, you know, Josh Allen for a flex. It doesn't make sense for him, you know. So that's what I have to say.
I agree. I think that's a great point when you talk about a win-win. I think people overlook that. I think they blindly look at the value of their players and they offer them to people that maybe don't need them. The other piece I think that goes into a win-win is you need to look at after a trade, especially if it's a trade where you trade one star for maybe 3 depth pieces. What does your starting lineup look? Maybe you move on from Tyreek Hill and you get 2 players that maybe it's not as good, but maybe your starting lineup gets better because in the RB2 you're starting nobody. I mean, maybe your team gets better, but you lose the trade. That's a possibility, and I think if your team is 0-2, it's something you need to look at doing. Tom, I'm going to throw out a creative trade offer for you. I'm curious if you're accepted as a Josh Allen owner. Let's say you want to trade Josh Allen to Chad Copes. Chad Copes offers you 5 free chiropractor sessions. Do you consider it?
Yeah, it's a done deal.
I think that's a done deal. I think it's a no-brainer for Chad Copes. Drew Brees is old. He's old. 5 free sessions. Thomas Wilkins going to get you some referral business after those free sessions. It's a no-brainer trade for both of us. The kid's back from Hawaii. He brought COVID with him.
Let's talk about Chad's team for a second because he has Drew Brees. I just don't think Drew Brees has it this year to be really fantasy relevant. So I was thinking about offering Chad a trade, but I also know how Chad feels about Drew Brees, so I didn't go there yet. But I would love to trade Chad and try to get T.Y. Hilton from him right now.
That's a great trade offer there. What a lot of you league members don't know, Chad Copes, actually a season ticket holder for the New Orleans Saints, has never been to the game, but he loves Brees that much. He is a season ticket holder for the last 7 years down at the Superdome, never been to a game, too busy with the chiropractor business in Hawaii. You absolutely love to see him back in the cities. Welcome back, Chad. Tom, there's one last topic I want to talk about. I think me and you are 2 of the strongest league members in this thing. I really do. We're both 0-2. We're both 0-2. There's a few other 0-2 teams out there, Tom. I'm curious, what do we got to do? Give me just 1 or 2 general sentences as an 0-2 team. What do you got to do to turn it around?
Don't panic. Well, what helps in our format is if you're getting points, I don't care about record. I don't really worry about record if I'm scoring points because you get that last spot as long as you have enough points. So I try not to worry about an 0-2 start because I feel like, especially in my scenario, I have not a great amount of points, but I think it was like 220 over 2 weeks. It's a 110 average, not bad. But I mean, what do? I mean, you try to figure out a better roster, whether that's waivers or trading, or just knowing that some guys that you have just have had a rough start. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, to keep it simple, I think you don't panic. You kind of trust what you did, or if you're regretting what you did, you figure out a way to fix it.
Absolutely. Don't panic. I think that is the key. Don't panic. Last year, your commissioner, 2-time champion Jack Filipiak, started the season 0-4. Was never worried, Tom. I was never worried. I made the playoffs. I had a legitimate shot to get to the championship game. Lost. Ended up taking 3rd place. And that's after an 0-4 start. You can turn around. 0-2, not the end of the world. 0-3 gets difficult. 0-4 does get pretty tough. 0-5, you're fucked. See you later. Have fun. See you next year.
View it like this, too. If you go 0-2, normally you need what, to be 7-6 to make it?
Got to have 7 wins to have a shot usually.
So view it as the season starts today and I need to go 7-4 to make the playoffs. Doesn't seem so bad, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Very doable. Very doable. Well, Tom, I'll tell you what, unless there's anything else that you want to talk about, we're at about the hour mark. I want to wrap up today's podcast. Was there anything else you wanted to touch base on?
No, I thought we had a really good session. I'm glad that the league is going to finally hear the proof that we don't hate each other.
I think that's the key takeaway, fellas. I had a lot of concerned messages that me and Tom are on the ropes, on the outs, not friends, not talking. Nah, folks, that's our shtick. We run the game, we run the gamut, we provide you entertainment. This is going to conclude the week 1, or the episode 1, week 2 podcast of the Eau Claire League Fantasy Football. Now, the tapings of this podcast are about as reliable as Brad Udarian's ankles, so do not expect this weekly, but we hope to produce a couple more. I hope to have a few new guests on the podcast. Please post in the message boards if you're interested in being a guest on the Eau Claire League Fantasy Podcast. That'll do it for me today. I'm Jack Filipiak, your 2-time champion commissioner, here with Thomas Wilkin. We are out. See you later.